CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy. After 2 years and more than 80 episodes of our Conversations on African Philanthropy, we are introducing a series of conversations that are theme-specific, program-focused, and at times recorded at the request of those at the coalface of implementation in order to document and tell their experiences and stories. In the first of such series, we focus on the Zimbabwe Alliance initiative, whose grants, convenings, capacity building, and technical support have fostered a vibrant civil society, where partners were empowered to design innovative and coordinated responses that amplified the voices of those marginalized, influenced the capacity of citizens to mobilize around national critical issues, engage with policymakers, and built regional and international solidarity in pursuit of a better Zimbabwe. Formed in 2010 to strengthen the role of civil society in influencing Zimbabwe's transition to democracy, the Alliance has evolved over several phases to what it is today. An initiative of several partners, Zimbabwe Alliance is a story of resilience, innovation, dedication, and passion expressed somewhat beautifully in some of the least expected places and ways.
Welcome to another special episode of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Moyo. As you already know, we are focusing on a special initiative on this part of the podcast, the Zimbabwe Alliance initiative, a donor collaborative that was developed and implemented between 2010 and is ongoing as we speak now. But essentially, a group of donors came together to try and support the strengthening of civil society in a country that was in transition, Zimbabwe, but secondly, to provide a platform for regranting. But over time, as any project, there's been shifts in the objectives and as well as in the approaches. We are using this moment to talk to a number of activists, a number of actors, a number of organizations and institutions that have been part of that process in one form or the other. I'm excited to be joined by Zhou. Zhou, welcome to the conversations.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you. I know I want to start on your life and time at ZimCODD,
Yes.
but you recently moved from ZimCODD to join the Southern Africa Trust. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How are you feeling? A woman of a certain age. Those who know.
Yes, exactly. I think that is exactly where I was caught in between being a woman of a certain age and continuing in the front lines and in the space of activism for quite a number of years.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a timely transition for me to join the Southern Africa Trust to do the work that I've been doing for Zimbabwe and for the region, but of course in a different station. I feel very energized. The work is sort of new in terms of the forecast, the network itself, the partners that we're collaborating with in the spaces that I find myself in. So it is really energizing, it is refreshing, and I look forward to making more impact at the regional level, supporting partners at the local level here in Zimbabwe, but also in a number of countries in the region.
Yeah. So, I mean, for people who saw the statement and the announcement, there were two things there about your new role and your life going forward. One was you were going to be a country manager for Zimbabwe. Maybe talk to us about what that entails. But we're also going to be a lead on issues of economic governance, among others. So maybe let's talk about those two elements of the position.
Yes. So you realize that the Southern Africa Trust just launched a new strategy called the Seriti strategy from 2024 to 2030. And there is a strategic shift in terms of country representation and presence, which is why I'm holding the portfolio for country manager for Zimbabwe to support the work in Zimbabwe across the pillars that it works on. That's gender justice, natural resource governance and climate justice, and the economic justice. Those are the three pillars that we have. Of course, cross-cutting issues as well. Gender still remains cross-cutting, but with also a pillar on its own, but also the youth engagement. So at the national level, at the country level, we're supporting partnerships, looking for collaborations for us to advance the work for all the pillars. But we also have those pillars and anchors for them, and I'll be anchoring the economic justice pillar in the region, and that's as well trying to do advocacy work, raising awareness in the region, in all the 16 SADC countries, where we'll be looking, of course, at where we are anchored and presence in terms of country offices, but also the opportunity countries where issues are emerging around poverty, inequalities, and what we can do in those countries. I would say that the role really shows the deployment of the region to the countries. So it's like the regional offices moved from Johannesburg to be in the country offices to pick the nuances in terms of context and how our response and interventions should be informed from that presence. So it's exciting to hold fort for both the country level issues across the pillars, but also be very specific in terms of focus at the regional level as a regional portfolio.
And then the other function, which is the lead on I think it's the lead on economic issues. So there's a country manager function, and then there's
then the economic justice function. The economic justice function, and it's very exciting in that we want to prove quite a lot of concepts. One of them is the K economy. That how do we advance a K economy in the region, noting the impacts of the various programs, for example, neoliberalism, privatization, pandemics, everything, and how they impact on women differently, and how they end up in this sector of unpaid care work. We want to unpack that. We want to be able to convene around that space and be thought leaders within that framework, so that we build that kind of K economy within the region as well. But of course, focusing on the many intersectionalities that come with the economic justice pillar.
So when we started, it was sounded like a joke when we said a woman of a certain age. But I'm always curious to want to understand, because you have held senior leadership positions in the past, and you're getting into this new exciting position. What does the first 90 days look like for a senior person like you, getting into a new space, but obviously having, the experience and potentially some traits from the past? How does the first 90 days look like?
Sure. For me, it's a lot of learning. I'm actually reading the book. The first 90 days, I've just started. Yes, exactly. I'm just starting on it. It's really learning and also unlearning for me. It's sort of a different space, like we have said. So there is a lot of learning that I need to do, and I'm coming in when as well the institution has just launched a new strategy. It's putting together a new team. So it has been a lot of learning about the team as well, the team dynamics, but also the strategy. I'm at the country level. I'm looking at mapping even partnerships. How are we going to move forward? We're going to develop our country strategy. Those are just some of the things that I'm looking at. We're putting together the country level team as well. So there's also recruitment that's going into it. We then on the economic justice, the portfolio as well that I'm holding, we're looking at the business case, putting the business case for it, looking at where are we going to get the resources, the resource mobilization aspects. So it's a lot of learning for me, but also exposure as well to networks and partnerships that we already have existing, and getting to understand the organization. It takes understanding even the organizational culture. How do we do work and business at the Southern Africa Trust, and building those relationships both internally and also externally. So it is a lot, I would say, in terms of really putting everything together so that we can then begin to move. And for me, I think it's also like hitting the ground running. We're talking of a new strategy and a new team being put in place. So it's looking at already what was existing, where are the gaps, how are we going to fill them in. But there's always a pause as you also take it in, I think, which is really important if you are joining a new institution, a new organization that probably operates quite differently, as thrown in the deep with board committee meetings, with the board meeting coming up. I'm sort of the only programs person who is now in place with all this recruitment that has to go on. So it's also trying to deal with things that were outstanding and things that are going on, proposals and all that. So it's but the support I think is there. Probably unlike when I became the executive director for ZimCODD, where everything was like I had to hold it forth and begin to build and think through what does the structure have to look like. How do we put in the structure? How do we work on the governance aspects and all that? I think it was really like a startup kind of thing. Yes.
So one of the things that I'm glad you're doing the first 90 days because it offers valuable I would say solutions, recommendations and options on what each person needs to do when joining an institution, whether you're coming from within or you're coming from outside. One of the biggest things that I really took out of that conversation or the book itself is that the system can either reject you or accept you, depending of course on how you are recruited, the people that you find, who are the cultural interpreters, among others. So that's something that maybe after 3 months,
after 3 months
we could talk about.
And the thing is, I've set my key performance indicators for the 3 months, and it includes quite a lot around operationalizing, recruitment, personal relationship management, and all those things. And like you have said, the system either accepts you or rejects you, and I've felt that before. When they like hosted the farewell for me at ZimCODD, I put my team that I remained with, and it was amazing. I had actually never thought of it that when I became executive director at ZimCODD, who did I remain with? I had someone in the admin department, an administrator, I had a receptionist, I had a security guard, I had a general hand who would do the sweeping, I had a finance officer. There was no program space. And why some decided to resign because probably they didn't believe in the leadership or new opportunities came through. Some we had to also offload, the Jim Collins Good to Great. I also read that when I joined ZimCODD. It's just part of the literature that I have read. So I remained with no one in the programs at all, and I was there. And I said I had to start from there and reality check. This is what I have. The budget is not there. There's no money. I can't recruit anyone. And we started from there. So it's always building that kind of system and the cultural shifts that have to go into it if you want substantive change.
Isn't that interesting and revealing? Because more often we think an organization is programs, but from a funding perspective and from an institutional building perspective, there are those core elements of an organization that can stay whether they are programs or not, and the positions that you just mentioned are the core. Then program can change today, tomorrow, and so on. So I think as leaders at times we focus so much on this programmatic level, which is really important because it really is what we are trying to solve out there. But from an institutional building perspective, if you are thinking about your resources and how to segment them, the resources that go to the core function of the organization will be about the security, the technology, and all of that.
You're very right. And actually, we got our first grant. My first grant is ED from OSISA of 200,000 without the programs people in place. But with the core team, like you're saying, this is the team that's going to drive the work. And we started from there. And from there, we built a multi-million-dollar organization with multi-layered, multi-year grants that then started coming in, and we started building the other parts of the institution to make it fit for purpose.
So let's talk about ZimCODD. I mean, my first interaction at an institutional level with ZimCODD was probably around 2007, 2008, I think. And at that time, Patricia, I think, was the... I'm not so sure it was Patricia was the executive director or Takarai. I think it was Takarai. She was programs.
Patricia was a programs coordinator, kind of doing the sub-scene work.
So I think it was Takarai at that point. And at that point, our interaction with them, I was with Trust Africa then. Our interaction with them was supporting the work on economic governance. So they were one of the first groups that when we started programming as Trust Africa around economic governance, we thought of ZimCODD, we thought of Tax Justice Network, we thought of economic Justice,
EJN.
EJN in Cape Town, and several others, Third World Network among them. And I want us to talk about, what ZimCODD is, why it came about, why it was established, what gap it was filling, and some of your reflections, at the helm of ZimCODD in terms of some of the successes, but obviously some of the barriers and limitations that you might have encountered.
Yes, I recall part of the support that was received from Trust Africa, and probably part of the building blocks in terms of building the movement.
Yeah.
And for me, ZimCODD remained that movement building organization in the civil society around the economic justice work, and breaking down economic justice issues to common citizens and people as we built the movement for them to be able to participate meaningfully in public policy making spaces. And I know that, for example, the issue dealing with the public debt as an issue and making it an average citizen, a common Zimbabwean citizen conversation was very difficult to break as we built the movement, because ZimCODD says it wants to build a vibrant movement for social and economic justice in Zimbabwe, and that movement speaks for itself. It has got a voice. It can engage from the local level, national level, through to the regional and international levels. And I've seen the institution occupy that space where it has managed to maintain its membership focus and remain a membership-based organization with membership at individual level, at institutional level, that has continued to grow over the years. But also the issue of raising awareness and citizens demanding for accountability within the public debt space, and offering the alternatives, and the sustained campaigns, for example, around debt transparency as an issue. And we've seen some kind of shifts in the government, for example, now production of the public debt bulletin on an annual basis, which they have actually met. The establishment of the public debt management office. I'm sure when ZimCODD started in 2000, there wasn't anything like that, and it continued to call for that. And we got it, of course, not as ZimCODD was calling for, as an example, because it wanted an autonomous public debt management office. But we got what we got, and something to work with, and continued to build those relationships, and it has continued to occupy space at the community level with the people, and hearing the impact of debt, the impact of talk tax, talk extractivism and all that. So at the community level, it is there to amplify that voice, but also at the national level, the recognition within the spaces and the influence it has made. I've spoken to some of those issues, but also the Public Debt Management Act as an example, its amendment and pushing for that. As you know, the government is actually in contempt of court after litigation from ZimCODD for its amendment to deal with the lacuna around the Minister of Finance just publicly guaranteeing debts without seeking for parliamentary approval. But they're looking at it now. I'm told they've actually done consultations. That's one. Two, the Public Finance Management Act being amended. We did an order of amendment just 3 days ago. I was being told by the ZimCODD team that all the amendments have been taken like that, and they are in the new bill. Amazing stuff in terms of legal reforms around issues around the policy reforms as well. But also calling for a dialogue within the public debt management space, noting the debt distress or the debt overhang, as the government would like to call it, that it's not a debt crisis, but a debt overhang that we have. And the various initiatives we have seen in terms of dialoguing at the national level. Currently, there's the structured debt dialogue process, which has got its own issues and challenges that it has faced since 2023. But it had been established, and goodwill at the beginning, facilitated by the former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano, and also the AFDB president as the champion, Dr. Adesina. So those are some of the processes that ZimCODD has found itself in as thought leaders, as representative of civil society. Talk of the various initiatives by the IMF, like the Article 4 consultations in terms of progress and all that. ZimCODD has participated and been consulted in all those spaces. come COVID-19, I've also seen lots of impact within that in terms of pushing for the SDR, now joining together with the bigger debt justice movement of saying we need liquidity in times of crisis, and we got the SDR. But of course, with these challenges that we continue to call at the global level around the multilateral institutions reforms, so we join then forces and hands with those. I would say that there's a lot of transformation that I've seen in terms of ZimCODD and the space that it occupies, and how the citizens have caught up to ask critical questions when they meet with their members of parliament, when they meet with their executive, like the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development and Investment Promotion, the Public Debt Management Office itself, but also at the local government level. I think there's some urgency that has been stimulated from the various initiatives, be it information dissemination, researches, various ways of engagements that it has used, that is packaged really for the citizen to understand and to take interest in economic justice issues. Then also at the technical and higher levels. But there have been challenges. I think Zimbabwe is just a context on its own. So sometimes it also feels like you take one step forward and three backwards. And this has mainly been because, especially when we look at illicit financial flows in the mineral resource governance sector, if you look at corruption, the tenderpreneurship in infrastructure development and all that. So you see, you would feel like you're really taking steps backwards in terms of plugging the loopholes in public finance management, and also the slow pace of the pace of the reforms themselves. Sometimes it feels like you're not doing enough, but it's also understanding that social change work, social justice work, it also takes time to really see those kind of changes. So it is, I think we still have a long way in terms of really building the blocks for transparency and accountability, and build the structure really going forward. But I think there are steps that it has continued to support, to promote, and see those basic little changes, strengthening parliament, the parliamentary portfolio committee system, working the public accounts committee, working the auditor general's office and all that, to at least put it out there, working with Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, using the judiciary as part of trying to make sure that we have some of those changes. But I think there's always shifting ground based on the broader governance question that we still need to work on and to address, and that takes collaborations. And I think that is one of the challenges or the barriers that I think it has only become recent that civil society in Zimbabwe can come together and say, you are working on the governance, human rights aspects, but we are here on the economic governance. How does it come together, and how do we build from there stronger civil society, a stronger voice? I think for a long time the dichotomy was just too much, such that we would not work together to address the bread and butter issues, while we are also dealing with civil and political rights. And I think that gap really created as well the slow pace in terms of holding the government accountable.
So I want to, it's not really a digression, but I want to digress a bit, because we are doing another case study of Zela, and one of the things that came up as I was talking to the colleagues there, especially the founders, is that Zela came in at a specific moment in the history of the country, just as ZimCODD did, and in addition to the programmatic outcomes and results, what I was picking up is that Zela has also produced a huge caliber of individuals who have actually moved on to join universities, international organizations, etc. And I was sitting here thinking about ZimCODD, that from the time I started interacting with ZimCODD, and I think of the people that were there and where they are now, fascinating, because it also came in at a time when economic governance wasn't really a thing, and now a lot of people that went through ZimCODD were produced, and they're in all sorts of places. I remember the first grant that ZimCODD received from Trust Africa. There was a component in that grant that had to do with technical support, And one of the people who was to benefit from that was a guy called Showers
Oh,
Mahoa. I think it was either for a PhD or for something that he was doing.
Okay. Yes.
And I know now that he's doing greater things elsewhere. And there were other people that went through the system. Maybe let's talk a bit about some of that uncelebrated part of institutions where they actually produce individuals who then go on to lead other facets. I mean, are there specific individuals that, of course, you are one of them now? You have.
I should be.
We start with you.
I hope I am.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I hope I am.
Yeah.
Honestly, ZimCODD is as well that kind of an incubator. I'm actually just smiling because I'm actually coming from a meeting with one of the founding people at Zela. I'm just like, oh yeah, and this is the conversation we were even having about transitions and how people transition, and we're like, so how do we transition? How does it feel like? Even people from our organizations, we've been like there and done all this. Are you even employable? Can you? What else is it that we can do? And we're just trying to unpack that. And true, ZimCODD has been that kind of an incubator. I've seen people occupying higher offices, being in different influential stages in the economic justice space, in the academia for some of them. And I'm just thinking if you go back in time, Devi Malungis are now in advocates in South Africa. Talk of Joy Mabenge, country director with Action Aid, and Ntando Ndlovu, who is country representative for Africa Grupena. Showers here pointed out to that with Dr. Tinashe Gumbo, who is now in Nairobi leading an African convening, I think, for churches and all that, really holding big positions. Quite a lot of people that have passed through ZimCODD and grown to become people that are very impactful change makers in the region, at the continental level, but also at the global level itself. And just to say that even when I look at the roots, it's not only at secretariat level, but also in the governance structures. ZimCODD has had people like Tawanda Mutasa, Depros, Muchena, Arnold Tsunga. Those were like the people that really were there when it began. And they have influenced how ZimCODD has transformed itself, but also they continue to influence from where they are. I think when they tell their story, they were just young men from college, with this passion to build, and many of them passed through ZimCODD. So I would take it that it's you get grounded, and it's always good, I think, to have that basic ideological grounding in terms of what you represent, especially if you would want to occupy the Pan-African space, as an example. Your Hope Well Gumbo, I'm just thinking, there's so many of them. Freeman Masuku, now the third person in Gauteng around in process. All those people pass through ZimCODD, so they're occupying all the space. Yes, Dewama Vinga, who then passed on, was ZimCODD program officer at one point, very influential in his own time. So I would say that joining ZimCODD has always been that kind of a thing, you know, that you're getting into a solid organization in terms of building your career. And when I became executive director, I would always tell my team that, you know what, when you make this institution shine and people are talking about ZimCODD, they want to know who is behind all this great work. So you're not just doing it for ZimCODD to be out there, but for yourself, because people are going to actually seek to know who is at ZimCODD and see this great team we have. So even our own partners taking some of the stuff that have worked at ZimCODD for them to join. Our funding partners actually, some have employed some of us in different spaces.
Great. I think that's less celebrated in our institutional biographies. We need to find a way of, bringing that and celebrating it. Now let's talk about.
Usually when people go, we are ahead, because sometimes we like them and we never realize that it's actually
you're actually amplifying amplifying the work and
you're like, oh, they're leaving, but it's actually a good thing.
It's a good thing because you're amplifying the visibility, but also the spread of the institution. So let's talk about ZimCODD's participation at the ZimAlliance initiatives, in particular the Citizens Manifesto, which had several components to it, one of which was the Citizens Cabinet, the other was the National Convention, the community assemblies, the bulletins, as well as the masterclass.
Yes.
And you were involved in each of those in one form or the other.
Yes.
So in terms of the cabinet, let's talk to us about how ZimCODD participated. I know you were bringing in the economic cluster,
Yes.
but maybe if you could describe to our audience and
Yes,
to
exactly.
our listeners how you were participating in that.
Okay. So I had the privilege of conceptualizing, especially the Citizens Cabinet. The manifesto was done, then its different pathways. And one of them was the Citizens Cabinet, which I had the privilege of conceptualizing and beginning that process with the team at Trust Africa and ZimAlliance. And of course, ZimCODD came in representing the economic governance cluster, and we were looking at public finance management, ZimCODD and Ledris. And it was Naomi Chakanya was seconded to that. So it was the two of us would look into the processes around public finance management, the cabinet minute itself, the government cabinet minute itself when it comes to public finance management, and we'll do our own with citizens' perspective in terms of the aspirations of the citizens. So I participated in that, representing the economic governance cluster, but I was also the deputy convener for the space, which meant that in terms of leading all the processes within the Citizens Cabinet, producing the bulletin itself, reviewing it, and working with the Secretariat. I was really heavily involved in that. The same as well for the Citizens Convention, which we convened a number of them with critical questions. And for me, it was a convening space for social movements, for communities. And it was such a lively space for me, very diverse, very inclusive, with pointed questions. And for me, it is, those questions were always leading and telling in terms of the Zimbabwean national question, what it is that we need to be asking ourselves. And it being an intergenerational kind of space, so would bring in, the old guard, if I may put it that way, for lack of a better word, to really meet with the communities, with the young generation, and say, what are the critical questions we need to ask ourselves, and how do we move forward? Where are we now? What makes us unhappy? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? I think there were like 3 or 4 questions that we would need to discuss, to answer to, and use the systems approach in terms of, so where are the pieces, where the ecosystem, how does it look like, and how do we penetrate and influence it? So within the Citizens Convention, we kept on growing in terms of the participation of the various sectors, as well linking with this cabinet to say, okay, so this is what is coming out of the bulletins. How do we bring that to answer to the questions that we were asking at the Citizens Convention itself? So that, I think, participation, then it includes the community assemblies that you've spoken about. I think an initiative we said we need to continue to gather, and that happened mostly in COVID-19, where we had the convention in different places as assemblies, and connecting that, and say people in their own space where they are, this is what is going on, and this is what these are our aspirations. And I think it also, both spaces had a different flavor. I think, like I was saying, that in Zimbabwe we kind of have a way of putting all these things into various silos. Business works on its own, civil society on its own, government on its own, and it's always like that. But that space also brought business people, the business community. I would remember us sitting in conversations, like for the Citizens Cabinet, with the likes of Shingi Mutasa, bringing, not Mutasa, the other one, Munyeza. Yes, Shingi Munyeza, myself, and others. So it's really diverse to say what kind of a Zimbabwe from the business perspective, from the civil society perspective, from the academia, from the government itself, your Nigel Chanakiras being also in the space and informing and influencing our voice as civil society and building it out from there. So I really thought that space was more was very inclusive, was very influential, even in terms of sometimes the political trajectory that we took at some point, because that is where the voice around building a citizens initiative, a civic initiative came from, to say how do we center the citizen in all the conversations that we have, the dialogues that we have in Zimbabwe. I would say, that's about the cabinet. That is about the Citizens Convention, but the political economy masterclass as well, which we participated in as ZimCODD, is one of the core conveners. So it had different conveners, and we were a core convener as ZimCODD. Once again, bringing in the economic justice perspective, we conceptualized that, identified the resource persons, even as well the participants themselves for the political economy masterclass, and as well really trying to build the alternatives but raising the awareness. And we were not only making use of the academics, but to say those that are practicing the practices, what do they call it, the organic intellectuals who are really out there on the ground and practicing, coming in to interact with these youths, with these people, the activists that we had gathered for the master class, which I think was very organized. It included the academics, it included the organic intellectuals we're talking about, just sharing their experiences and having the questions being asked, and we participated in that as well. Even like doing the modules with the likes of Dr. Mrisa for the various aspects, leading as well. What are the key issues coming from all these conversations? So it links what Citizen Cabinet is saying, what the convention saying. So what do we need to learn? Where's the gap? And I think part of having the political economy masterclass is identifying that we have this need for us to ground our activists in understanding the political economy and the nuances in terms of what is exactly going on, be it land, be it debt, gender, and all these aspects that we picked for the political economy masterclass.
So where are those things now? What came out of those processes? Because you were at one point the deputy convener. so what came out of those things? Because it sounds like very good initiatives, good processes, but we've spoken to different people. It seems like those things are dormant now.
They are.
But let's talk about what came out of it first, and then your reflections on why they are dormant now. Because it sounds like it was a very useful initiative.
Very useful initiatives, and I've kept on saying, why did we not continue at some level? But I guess it's just the state of our civil society, probably. I would put it that broadly. It's also the state of civil society in Zimbabwe, and how the spaces continued to either shrink or to roll back or to close, whichever way you decide to look at it. I think that has taken some lots of energy from people, and also the political space, and what has happened, I think, has kind of demobilized people or immobilized people to a very greater extent of saying, so what is it that we do? And I think reconvening after COVID-19, after various elections that we have held, and now they just leave people so hopeless. I think is a major contributor to the space being very dormant, as you have put it. I think various events have really led to some decimation of the agency that we had built, because we had built that community agency, even thinking around modeling some of the economic models, the political models we need, the civic models that we need. We're being formulated in those spaces and in those initiatives and conversations that we were having. But I think generally the context is one that has kind of taken a lot of energy, a lot of steam from people, because of various events. Like I said, it's not only political, it's not only governance, but also COVID-19 happened. Various crises, the crisis that we have has caused us to be where we are. But for me, I think they were great initiatives that, in many aspects as well, even got government responses. We have had the elders come and support our spaces, taken even to hold our government accountable in many ways, coming by Harare Gardens, meeting with communities, working with communities in terms of modeling the answer for Zimbabwean, for the Zimbabwean crisis and challenges that we are facing, and continuing to even link with some of them, even at individual levels, bringing in the various communities we are talking about, representatives to meet with, for example, Mama Gracia Machel and many others, really opening up their offices to meet with Zimbabweans and saying, so where are the solutions?
Right,
How do we keep
Yeah.
the momentum? I think
Yeah.
the momentum
Yeah.
is what we could not
sustain.
sustain.
Yeah. But it could be that it moved into a different form of organizing. So, for example, I know that there's also been another emphasis on the barazas, which is social movements
As well.
gatherings, and maybe we could talk about that as well in terms of how ZimCODD, yourselves and others have been part of this social movements work around the baraza. I think the first one happened here, and then we went to South Africa, and then I think upcoming should be either West Africa also.
I think there's that morphing that always happens.
Yeah.
And for us as ZimCODD, maybe to actually go back to ZimCODD's involvement in all these spaces around the cabinet, the convention, the political economy masterclass, for us, we were seeing the morphing of spaces like the social forum as an example. We were seeing, what was that called? Was it ILRIG in South Africa where people would go for the school? Morphing into the political economy masterclass that we are talking about. So I think there is always as well that transformation and, these spaces coming up, being probably different, if you put it that way. The baraza itself is seeing the Southern Africa People's Social Forum as an example in all these spaces. So our participation was seeing exactly probably the same model, but better and more focused and more pointed in terms of the issues that that we are looking at. So we have participated as well and facilitated for our membership to participate, our activists, the social movements that are part of the ZimCODD membership, participating as well in all those spaces. And for 2024, I'm actually in the steering committee of the baraza. Yes, organizing and planning for it. I think this was supposed to be in Nairobi, Kenya, but you know what has happened, and the question has remained, what exactly do we do? But in terms of really planning and saying how should the program look like and all that, we're working on that. But I think it's only an issue of who hosts now. And we have seen that space not just as a gathering of the social movements, but also of those that support the social movements, and them having space to really meet with some that can support their work, and even brokering partnerships, which is really good. The other bit that I think I have seen that I can point out is how we have also centered arts, the artists really within the space, in the communities as well. I think it's part of it. We have let the art speak here in Zimbabwe. We have seen it go global in different spaces where artists are really as well linking. Part of the spaces we've used music, we've used poem, we've used painting, we've used all this previously in terms of expressing ourselves, and this has also continued in terms of supporting that work, and different players coming in, top of Magamba, many others who are part of the initiatives that we have, and how they've influenced freedom of expression and us expressing ourselves in various ways, and creating space for us through art to express ourselves as well.
So I don't think the initial founders of the concept of the ZimAlliance, I spoke about, the different people, the Schooner Foundation, Cynthia Ryan, people from the Wallace Global Fund, Ellen, Scott himself, Briggs, people from Trust Africa, Kwasi. I was then the programs director, but also there were other forces like Kuminaitu, Nomboniso Kasa, who actually showed solidarity to the initiative, and they went on a hunger strike for a number of days in DC and among others. So I don't think when they started, they had this idea that the initiative would morph into all these elements, where you've got the Art Speak, you've got this manifesto, you've got the Baraza, you've got these other strengths that it has had. And so over time it has really shifted from just being thought of as a re-granting facility to an organizer of sorts, and etc. Which raises the question, and I want you to draw from your experience, having worked and continue to work in Zimbabwe, a country that probably is not classified as in transition, but actually we know that it is forever in transition, and talk about how, if you were given an opportunity to advise a group of donors or development partners who want to do like what ZimAlliance did, how should they think of supporting these kinds of work in a context like Zimbabwe?
So I'm just thinking of the word transition. I remember at ZimCODD we even held, probably it's part of what Trust Africa supported at some point, the economy in transition. We had the economy in transition dialogues that I think started during the GNU.
Right. And that's the time at which the initiative was actually
exactly
begun,
so the thinking is it's in transition, and it seems like it's such a perpetual kind of transition, and thereafter the fatigue that has actually come out of it. If we look at the donors, like for example you're saying of philanthropists or funding partners as they may want to come in, a whole lot, then it just lost the steam as well from that level as well. And my thinking is that I've sort of given up in terms of really the national level kind of interventions and questioning and saying let's go back to the basics and the drawing board and build the citizen once again. I believe citizenship was lost along the way because of the various reasons we've spoken about, how things have changed and the context has made it very difficult for citizens to be citizens. We're talking of a country that is always in election mode, that has this descriptive nature of a citizen just as a voter. You just want to vote. What do I get out of it? I think we need to go back to the concept of citizenship and saying, how do we make our interventions from the local level, but then connect them to the global level at some point? I believe that they are still very active activists, active spaces at the local level, at the community levels that we could build from, and then build that network of those activists from the different communities that we have. I think it's really going back to the communities and saying, let's go back there and show them that you can actually start by changing where you are. How do we model systems that work from the ground? I remember for the convention, do you know about Kondozi Farm, the one that was once taken by the government? I think it does blueberries. They once took it, but then it went down. But the previous owner was brought back. He's a Zimbabwean black man who came back and doing amazing work on part of the land. And we're saying, how do we show those models as examples that are working? I think we need to either create them or identify them and support those so the community, so the citizens can see that it works. I'm always thinking that advocacy work has to be backed as well by showing the alternatives that we're talking about. How do we create those spaces? How do we create those models that work? They may make the government see, or we can use them in the future as we continue to move. I believe that at some point we are going to have Zimbabwe working again, but we need to have been creating those models at the community levels, be it in the farming, be it in the mining, the people that are doing it right, be it in terms of just social services, be it community leadership. I mean, WhatsApp groups where I'm like, residents associations kind of have failed in Zimbabwe, but people formed their own WhatsApp groups where they are held accountable. They are councillors there. Everyone in this so active, and that's leadership at the community level. No one is paying anyone anything, but people know that we have to call ZESA. Everyone, here is the fold number until they have addressed it. Refuse collection is not being collected. Those are what every community, every ward that I know has got those. That are working.
Fascinating, because I attended a meeting recently, and Professor Masonungure Altret was presenting the alpha parameter studies and results, and one of the things that came up there was that when he looked at how people used to express dissatisfaction, they asked the question whether people have gone to march or protest. And it showed that from 1997, I think the figures, the percentage has been going down. Now it's at 1%. And I actually said to him, it could be that these tactics of engaging and showing dissatisfaction have actually changed. So rather than in the context, rather than expecting people to go to a protest and a march, people are using different forms of showing dissatisfaction. And it could be now that people are organizing on WhatsApp, they're organizing here, and they're actually getting results, and we're not tracking that. So the issue is that people are still engaged,
Very much.
but they are engaged in a different format.
In a very different format.
Yeah.
We know that there's a time that I just go back to the residents associations where it was like active. Residents association was the space for organizing, and that failed at some point, and people started organizing themselves. And the answers, two community groups, two different wards. And there are results in there that probably we have not even tapped into to see how they organize, how community leaders have emerged out of it, who take a responsibility. Say, I've met with the engineer, this is what they have said, they're going to be there on this day, they're going to address this on this day. Community leaders that have come up. So for me, it's supporting those, but also then linking to the governance question to say, how do we theorize to the end? So that this community leader who is leading in terms of making sure that every Wednesday refuse is collected, they can also think political and say, when the next election comes, is it possible for me to stand as a councillor? And how do we encourage them? How do we support them so that we theorize it to the end? Probably it's part of what I would say kind of killed the movement as well for us, even for the Citizens Convention and the Citizens Manifesto, that I don't think we really theorized it to the end to say, how do we support even those that will in the end have political ambition to be in public office? Not for the president, not for at their community level, and start that transformation from there. So I think for me it's a critical question to say, these movements, these spaces that we create, how do we theorize them to the end and say, how do we continue to support even those that decide to grow into public offices? How are we going to give them support? How are we going to make sure we actually encourage it, if we can at all be able to do that? Yeah.
So Janet, thank you so much. I think we have covered most of the issues that we wanted to talk to you about, but really exciting reflections, both on your time at ZimCODD, your participation and that of ZimCODD in the ZimAlliance initiative, especially the Citizens Manifesto, the Cabinet, as well as the masterclasses. So thank you so much. I know I did not introduce you when we started. We started about the exciting things. So that was Janet Zhou, who is currently the country manager for Southern Africa Trust, but also the team lead for the economic justice work, but former executive director of ZimCODD. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.